Hi, Marty. Welcome to the Sakara Life podcast. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Our first question we ask every guest is, what is your mission? What are you here to do and give?
I hope this doesn't sound too woo-woo or highfalutin or whatever, but from the time I was a young child, I just had a very strong feeling that I was meant to help with a shift in the way people think. And it was very vague, but it wouldn't go away. And I've sort of defined it more and more crisply as the years went by. Now that I'm old and gray under my hair dye, I call it the transformation of consciousness. And I've met many other people who feel like they also are involved in it. Yeah, I'll never forget seeing it on a memo that someone had written. And I just was like, wait. Other people are in this?
Wait, that's my memo.
So yeah, I think the Earth itself is in a perilous position. Well, the Earth is fine, but we are in a perilous position. And we're facing problems we've never faced before, the overpopulation, all of that. And we're going to need a serious change in the way we live, and that requires a serious change in the way we think. And I call that the transformation of consciousness, and that is my mission, to help.
That's beautiful. And a transformation from what to what?
I think it's a transformation from people who live as frightened, doomed animals. Was it Keats who says we all live chained to a dying animal? That is a very frightening way to go through life. No other animal has that because they're not conscious of. They can't abstractly predict their own death, so far as we know, and that makes us. It makes us frightened, and that makes us cruel. It makes us avaricious. It makes us greedy. It makes us obsessed with things and more things and getting things and power and looking good and just a lot of stuff that people are trying to cram in before they die.
Right.
And that's the way humans have pretty much always been. And there is another way, and we've seen it in individuals here and there in history all over the globe, people who experienced something that took them into a state of being where they were aware of their connection with everything else, aware of the oneness of consciousness and how it pervades everything, and therefore very relaxed, because if you're consciousness and you're everything, you're not doomed. You just may change shapes. And that kind of relaxation makes people naturally compassionate, generous, empathetic. And it's that simple. The shift from a fear-based psychology to a compassion-based psychology.
It's right. It's like if you're in that fear-based state, you have to look out for yourself alone versus in the compassion.
Yourself, yeah.
Right. And so in that compassion state, you can, as you said, be generous. And we had Marianne Williamson on the podcast a while ago now, and she talked about this in a way where she said, we're all waves, thinking we're just waves rather than waves as part of the ocean.
Right.
And once we recognize that we're all part of this one thing, it changes our behavior. So how do you specifically in your work help this transformation take place, either in the individual or collective?
Well, my focus has always been on my obsessive belief that people have all the instructions inside them, but everyone's instructions are individually calibrated for their particular life. So nobody else can know what your path is meant to be, but you do. In fact, you can't not know. And yet, most of us, mainly because of socialization, sometimes because of trauma, something happens to us that makes us start ignoring what we feel and know at the deepest level and even at very simple levels. Like I often, when I'm speaking to a group, will say to them, I'll just stop in the middle of a speech and say, is everyone comfortable? And they'll be like, what? Yeah. And I'm like, no, seriously, is everyone really, are you comfortable? And they're like, yeah. You're sure? Yeah. Okay, so how many of you, if you were sitting at home alone right now, would be sitting in exactly the position you're in at this moment? Nobody raises a hand. And then I say, why? Why would you be in a different position? And it takes them a long time to realize that it's because the way they're sitting is not that comfortable. And the problem is not that they're uncomfortable because it's not a horrible thing. The problem is that they knew at the level of physical experience that they were uncomfortable. And yet they swear repeatedly that they are perfectly comfortable while they know they are not comfortable. So we do this in every area of our life.
Yeah.
We're in a relationship. Is it a comfortable? Oh, of course. No. We're in a job. Is it comfortable? Oh, yeah. Considering. No, it isn't. You're in a pair of shoes. Are they comfortable? Well, I like the high heels, so okay. No, they're really not that comfortable. It's not, discomfort is not the problem. The problem is the denial of our own experience. And once you stop knowing what makes you uncomfortable and what makes you comfortable, you're just running on social programming that says, given what I'm trying to present and what I'm trying to achieve here, I am tolerably comfortable. And the reality of your own physical, emotional, spiritual experiences disappears into that socialized sort of limited, sort of narrow focus.
That's so interesting. So, basically, by denying our own lived experiences, it forces us into what you're saying is kind of that fear-based mentality. Like, can you connect those two dots for me? Like, so how me denying my own experience puts me into that place where I'm denying the oneness.
It's not that denial puts you into fear. It's that fear puts you into denial. So you don't decide, I'm going to pretend to be different than I am, and then get scared because you're different than you are. What happens is you're at a party. People are talking. They're saying things about politics, about ethnicities, whatever, and you're really, really uncomfortable. But you're afraid to voice your real feelings. And so you keep them inside and you push away the knowledge that you're very uncomfortable. And then you get even more afraid because now you've hidden something. Now you've got secrets and you don't want anybody to find out who you really are. And inside you develop more and more fear as you conform more and more and project the image of someone you're actually not. And you live in constant fear because you think that if people knew who you really were, they would not love you, they would not accept you. And that for a social primate is the ultimate disaster.
It's so interesting because I feel like what you're saying, it's so layered because I can maybe know that I was uncomfortable at that party, but the other part of what you're saying, I don't think most of us know about ourselves. I don't think most of us know that we are pretending to be comfortable at that party so that we are socially accepted. It's almost like this knee-jerk reaction that very few of us ever kind of like reflect upon.
Yeah, and people go far, far, far away from their real purpose because they think their purpose is to please people. And that starts before we're even talking. It starts when in young babyhood, we already start to notice what makes the adults smile and what makes them frown or what makes them angry, what makes them think you're wonderful. And if that suits our true nature, if what we're expressing is true for us and all the people love it, then that's great. But if the people around us don't agree with the way we want to express our true nature, like crying when we're sad or whatever, we sell out our nature hard and go straight for the cultural acceptance. And that's just part of the human brain. It's part of the human psyche, but it leads to incredible suffering.
I hear you talk about true nature a lot in your work. What is that?
Well, if you grew up in China, you would be speaking Chinese and interacting with people in the way Chinese people do. And that is your cultural self. if you look at culture and nature as a pair of opposites, if you grew up in France, you would speak French and interact the way French people do. You're American or Canadian or whatever you are, I don't know. You act different ways. All of those are cultural adaptations. But whether you were born in China, in France, or in the US, you might have a preference for a certain kind of music. You might really love the water. You might be an introvert or an extrovert. These things are part of your genotype. They're part of who you really, who you're constructed to be physiologically. And they can't be altered. And that part of you is the part I call the true nature.
And how do you get to know it?
You allow it to express itself in the ways that it was designed to do. It sends you signals all day, every day. And mostly you ignore it.
Right.
I mean, I don't like hypotheticals. So when I'm in interviews, I tend to start talking about the host's actual life. And that makes a lot of hosts extremely uneasy. So I'm going to say this
I'm
up
fine.
front.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't mind getting a little uncomfortable.
Okay, so describe to me your least favorite place in your living space, like your house, apartment, wherever you live.
Oh, what an interesting
Walk
question.
through it in your mind and see if there's any place that's like, ugh, like a junk drawer or a room that just doesn't have the right feng shui or whatever it is.
Yep, I've
Do you
got
have
it.
one?
Yeah.
What is it?
We have like a little terrace off our apartment that has like kind of turned into storage, basically. It's not pretty. It's not organized.
So think about that part of your house, the terrace. Think about looking at it and notice the feelings in your body and your emotions without trying to change them, push them away, deny them. You're looking at that terrace. What do you feel?
A little agitated.
Okay, good. I mean, not great, but good that you're naming it.
Annoyed, maybe a little tired. Like I don't want to look at it.
Okay, great. So you're annoyed, you're tired, you're agitated, you don't really want to look at it. So if you look at tell me about your favorite part of your apartment.
We have this really beautiful white sofa that kind of sits next to a window that gets a lot of sunshine.
So when you sit there and enjoy that, what do you feel?
Well, it's very comfortable, so I can feel my nervous system relax. There's no TV, no screens in that room. Like it's just when you sit there, you're either sitting there alone in alone time, or you're sitting with like my kids and friends and having conversation.
So there's light, there's space, there's simplicity, there's openness, there's love, there's comfort. Okay. What are the things that are on the terrace? Can you describe some of them to me?
Oh gosh, not to throw my husband under the bus, but it's a lot of his stuff. Like tools and things that like we need, but they're just not, like we have an extra freezer, odds and ends toys, things that are broken that we keep meaning to fix.
So the stuff that's necessary for you to get by in certain ways in the world. Yeah. So
I think
the feeling of your favorite space in the house is the feeling of your true nature. That's, if there's nothing impinging on you, that's the way you're going to feel. If you're allowed to just build your life from whatever brings you joy. But when you have parts of your life that don't bring you joy, but you have to cope with them anyway, you have to add things to your life. You have to add things to your schedule and to your way of interacting with people. And it sounds to me as if your biggest issue is just logistical. And maybe the fact that your husband has projects and ideas that he wants to deal with that he has sort of pushed onto the terrace and he doesn't know where he's going with that stuff. So that's his issue. But you're married to him and that's your issue.
Yeah, indeed.
So you have to, so that'll point to, okay, in places where he's off his true nature. Maybe he's a person who wants to use those tools, really wants to, but he never gives himself time. And so it's just an amalgamation of tools that don't get used. And here's the thing. Danielle, never put off till tomorrow what you can cancel. Because you've only got one wild and precious life. And if there are tools and stuff, freezers and stuff out there that have, do you need them and do they give you joy? I'm sounding like Marie Kondo.
Yeah.
Do you need everything on that terrace?
I don't
the
think
terrace?
so.
Okay. Do you need everything in your life?
No, definitely not.
Anything that feels like that beautiful white couch in the corner with your children there and the sunlight and that stays. You specifically mentioned no screens.
Yeah.
So the buzz and the logistics of everyday life and the places where your husband may not be feeling very fulfilled, you can love him and not take that on. You can love him from a place of such clarity in your own life that he begins to see by watching you what to put aside and what to pick up. I really identify with your husband. I had a lot of tools I didn't use for years, decades. And when I finally realized they were there because it's part of my true nature to use them and started using them, everybody saw this drastic change in my personality. And I just was like, I just like to draw.
Do things, make things.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Like what you just walked me through, is that something that you walk people through to help them find their true nature?
Yeah, that's coaching. Right. I call that an access tool. We call it the living space tool in the training that I run. The idea is, I had a lot of therapy and I owe my life to it, but there are things I disagree with about a therapeutic approach to all problems. To some, it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
But when a mentally healthy person goes into therapy and starts, trying to revisit childhood and do a lot of the things that are considered standard in a lot of the psychiatric and psychological traditions, they're not actually moving into fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
So I like to say it's like a personal trainer will take you from basically healthy to high performance, really healthy. A doctor will get you from sick to well. A psychiatrist or a psychologist can get you from mentally unhappy to pretty much okay. What I do is to try to find the instructions for the life mission that would fill them with joy, that would make every single step they take, ideally, that, consciously part of the one wild and precious life they're here to live, so that they can get the maximum joy out of life and give as much as they're meant to the world. So yeah, call it coaching. I like the word psychopomp, which is a Greek word meaning guide of the soul, but that sounds a little arrogant and also stupid and nobody knows what it is.
I love what you're saying though, because it's been such a huge part of my life to find my mission, like the thing that just kind of resonates and helps me wake up feeling as though I'm in service and to something bigger than myself, to being a part of like that oneness that you spoke to. And that's why our first question is always about mission, because, we tend to have a lot of people on the podcast who are familiar with that feeling or can understand, like, yes, I found the work that really resonates with what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
A lot of what you talk about too is anxiety. So how did you end up, you were talking about fear earlier, but what is the difference between like fear-based versus anxiety-based thinking?
Well, I've been looking at this issue for the last 5 years or so because I wrote a book called The Way of Integrity, out of my belief that if you are actually living in alignment, body, heart, mind, and soul, and you're not fooling yourself, which most of us do, that you won't experience any psychological suffering. If you only believe what is true and you do what you know you is really right for you, psychological suffering ends. Well, a lot of people came up to me and said, I don't lie to myself. I'm in perfect integrity, but I am so afraid all the time. And I started looking into statistics, and I saw that anxiety disorder was absolutely skyrocketing, and it continues to grow and grow and grow around the world, and it's causing people so much pain. And I thought, I left out the part that says if you're in absolute integrity, if you dig way down into what you actually are. You stop feeling like a human in a like you're chained to a doomed animal, a dying animal, and you realize you're something more. But people were getting stuck on the anxiety issue. So I looked into it. First of all, you mentioned the difference between fear and anxiety. So fear is what happens when I started my book. I was actually writing it in South Africa in a little cottage way out in the bush, they call it there, out in the wilderness. And I didn't realize that there was a screen door on the window next to me, on the door next to me, but no, the glass door hadn't been closed. It was a sliding door. So I'm writing away and I'm like, what do I put in the introduction? And I hear, oh
God.
And I went completely ballistic because I know exactly what that sound is. It's a leopard calling. But I mean, I don't do it that well, but it's kind of like that. And the leopard was right by the screen door. And I didn't know the door was open. So the quality of the sound made me think he was in the room.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not generally afraid of leopards. They'd keep to themselves, but I'd never had one come into the room with me at night while I was alone in my pajamas. And I experienced a magnificent burst of fear. I practically leapt up onto the roof and clung there like a monkey. And then I realized within about half a second that he was moving. He was just walking around announcing where his territory was. And he'd just come by to say, hey, my territory. And I'm like, got it. And within 5 seconds, I knew I was safe. And the fear took 90 seconds to wash through my body and be gone. That's fear. It's like being shot from a cannon. It's a clear impetus that says, I need to do something right now. Anxiety is like being haunted. There's no implication for action except to lie awake at night and twist the sheets between your fingers. It's not directed at anything that is physically present in your environment. It's about things usually in the future that could go wrong, things that went wrong in the past. Shame gets blended in with it, and all this catastrophic imagining that all of us do. And the human brain is uniquely designed to allow that to happen. And in fact, it has a negativity bias that pulls our attention toward things that make us anxious. So you combine that tendency in the brain with the type of environment we have right now, so much information, so much calamity, so many terrifying predictions from scientists and so on. It makes absolute sense that anxiety is going up and up and up. But that doesn't mean that it needs to. Because at its base, anxiety is a lie. It's always lying.
What
Always.
do you mean by that? And is it because it's like a perceived future that doesn't yet exist? Or
Yes.
So it's not real right now.
Exactly.
That's the lie.
The only thing that is absolutely true for us right now, you and me, is what we're doing in this moment. And a meteorite could come through the window and obliterate me in the next 5 seconds. I don't care. As long as I stay in the present moment, I'm not afraid of being hit by a meteorite. But there are many things that I've been socialized to fear, even though they're not there. Like, debilitating illness, loss of loved ones. Things may happen, but if I'm obsessed with thinking about them, what happens is you go from the feeling of fear into a strategy, which is to control. You're trying to control everything. The strategy of control, and you build that up with a lot of stories about why it's necessary for you to control everything, everyone around you. And we do it in different ways. I used to do it by people pleasing. It's a way of manipulating and controlling people so they'll like you, right? But it was fear-based. It wasn't love-based. Anxiety makes us use our minds to do things that have nothing to do with our mission in life.
And so is that what you call the anxiety spiral, where like you figure out this whatever your pocket is that you're going to be anxious over in a moment, and then you just spiral?
Yeah, there's sort of a pulse in the brain that goes to fear, and then in the left hemisphere, it goes immediately to the part of the brain that experiences all the negative associations with fear, and then it goes to the left side speech centers, which immediately start telling us the story about how we're in danger and things are bad and we need to control it. And here's why I call it the spiral. The story that we tell ourselves about why we should be afraid, even though there's nothing in the room, goes back into that very primitive part of the brain as if the situation we're imagining were real. So if I had, the leopard went by, if I had then spent the whole night lying awake thinking, it's out there, it's coming to get me. Oh my gosh, I think they kill you. I think they suffocate you. No, they rip you apart with their claws. What's that going to feel like? Oh, this is all going to feed back into my little amygdala as if I'm really being eaten by a leopard. And I will have a horrible night in a beautiful, comfortable room with a lovely bed and friends all around me. And that's the anxiety spiral.
This is why I just cannot get behind scary movies and horror films, because I can feel the cascade of, peptides and molecules and neurotransmitters of like as if it's happening to me. Yeah. It's like that level of
people
suffering.
People kind of feel a sense of catharsis, I think, when they go to horror movies. I can't abide them. But there's another thing we always watch. I mean, always watch on TV, movies, whatever, and that's murder. Yeah. We are obsessed with murder.
Yeah. It's so true.
I think I read a statistic recently that said that by the time they're 18, American children have witnessed something like 80,000 murders, realistically depicted murders. The reason we're so obsessed with that is that the left hemisphere says, ooh, that's probably the greatest danger I have from any other animal is from another human. So I'm going to focus on that, and I'm going to tell so many stories about that I'm going to be able to be the detective and stop it from happening, or the heroic police officer who stops it. Now I can control this. I'm going to watch how that murderer got caught, and that will make me feel a sense of triumph. But then you're still left with, I better watch another murder. It could happen anyway,
So like, how do you get out of this spiral then? Like, what is the
You'll
what are
notice
the tools?
I've been talking about the left hemisphere of the brain. I have a wonderful friend named Jill Bolte Taylor, whom you may have had on the podcast. She did a TED Talk called My Stroke of Insight. It was the first TED Talk to go viral because Jill Bolte Taylor was a Harvard neuroanatomist who, at the age of 37, had a severe left hemisphere stroke. And because she was a scientist, she watched her brain shut down because there was a bleed in her brain and it would pulse and she'd lose all her left side function, and then it would release and her left side function would come back. That's why she survived. She just barely had enough time during that pulsing thing to dial a friend's number, and then she tried to talk to them and just sounds came out of her mouth. And then he tried to talk to her and it was just, she couldn't understand any language. So they got to her and they saved her life. And the miracle is that after 8 years of incredibly hard work, she rebuilt her left hemisphere and went back to being a scientist and author. And I met her right after her book, Whole Brain Living, came out. And she started talking to me about what happens when that left hemisphere is offline. The right hemisphere is not in time, so it's always just interested in what's present. Right hemisphere is more interested in things, more interested in watching what they do than in controlling them. The right hemisphere likes to connect things. Also, I mean, it gets really, really interesting because while she was in the shower having this stroke, and when her left hemisphere wasn't on, all she saw was a cloud of energy that was her hand, and it was intermingled with the cloud of energy that was the tile. And then her left hemisphere would come back, and there would be a solid hand with a solid wall. And then left hemisphere would shut down, fields of energy. It really reflects the way physics tells us matter actually works. I got really, really interested in what Jill was telling me, and she was so great to have many conversations about it. And basically, she taught me that on the right side, the amygdala has a pulse of, whoa, what's that? And then instead of going to control and fear, it goes to curiosity. What's that? And then it goes to connection. Oh, that's like this. And then it starts to create. What can I do with that? And I said, is there any anxiety? And she said, no, there's no time, so no anxiety. And I'm like, So if we can voluntarily move our neurological activity more to the right, as she always suggests in all her books and articles and things, if we can find ways to do that, we can go on a different spiral, a different self-reinforcing spiral. So I started doing everything I could and reading anything I could about what pumps up the right hemisphere. And I started trying experiments, and I became a very different person. I really don't care anymore what anyone thinks. And I'm just so pleased all the time. And it's like,
Wow.
it worked. It's been a couple of years now. I'm just like, oh my God, this is great. I'm not anxious at all. And there's no price to pay for this, but the outcome is whatever your mission is, whatever your joy comes from, you will begin to create it. And you will begin to create it incredibly fast. Like everything will just go on rocket fuel when you pull the energy that was going to anxiety and put it into creativity. So the opposite of anxious isn't calm, it's creative. And if we can take all the anxiety energy in the world right now and bring that into creative energy, then people will look at things like climate change, and instead of just staying awake at night sobbing, they'll start to think of ways to reverse climate change, which a lot of people are doing, by the way. But the more creative people get, the more we can solve our problems. The great lie of anxiety is, if I stay anxious, if I stay worried, I can solve this problem. That's why
I'm contributing to solving this problem.
And that, as I said, anxiety always lies, but only always. If we get into a creative mindset, we'll sleep well through the night. And when we get up in the morning and see the problem, we'll think, what is that like? How does that work? What's the math on that? Let me figure this. Yeah, the left hemisphere needs to do the math, of course. But the interesting thing is, when we're stuck in the anxiety spiral, that part of the brain does not believe that anything but its own perspective exists. So people who lose a part of their right hemisphere, if you ask them to draw a clock, for example, they'll draw a round circle and then put all the numbers on the right side of the clock and tell you it's finished. They'll make up one side of their face, or they'll shave one side of their face and say that's the whole job. There's nothing wrong with their eyes. The left hemisphere refuses to acknowledge that anything but its own perspective exists.
Right, like that's the singular side that brings things into a single focus.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people all over the world who are stuck in anxiety, and they really believe that their political position, their belief system, whatever it is the only truth. And it's violently polarized against another group of people who believe with equal intensity that their way is the only truth, right? It's all anxiety-based, all of that stuff. And if you got all those people in a room and said, look, let's build a raft so we can get off the island or whatever, and they all started actually creating together, you'd see a lot of those antagonisms melt, and you'd see friendships forming, and you'd see people contributing to the same types of solutions. There is one group of people who, in research, do that really, really well. One group, 5-year-olds.
That's awesome.
I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old. I totally know what you mean.
They did this experiment with spaghetti, uncooked spaghetti, marshmallows, and I think it was a piece of masking tape. And the assignment was to build a tower out of these spaghetti and marshmallows. And they gave the test to engineers, architects, lawyers, business school students, intellectuals of all kinds who failed miserably. They gave it to 5-year-olds, and they just built a tower because they were not yet socialized into, okay, what's going to impress other people? Should I say that? Should I really be saying my ideas out loud? I'm probably wrong. I have imposter syndrome. What'll I do? They weren't anxious. The 5-year-olds were just like, here, give me that.
And, right, and not afraid to fail because, like, what is failure?
That didn't work. Oh, okay.
Right.
that does work. Oh, good. And so they collaborated without talking much, and they by far built the highest tower.
What are some of the tricks to build up that like right side of your brain hemisphere?
I love this so much, this question. One of the best things you can do is go for a walk in nature. That'll get you started right away. If that floats your boat, there's nothing better. And when you get out there in the wild world, psychologists know that the way the human brain learns best is outside in nature, solving problems that are necessary to move forward in the situation we're in at the moment. So you come to a river. How do you cross it? Can you find a log? Can you find stepping stones? What do you do? If you solve problems that way because you need to solve them, that's how we evolved to think. And it makes us happy. If you think about it, for hundreds of thousands of years, people lived well on the earth by doing things like hunting and fishing and gardening and weaving and storytelling and child raising. And now, in the modern world, we go to offices that have nothing to do with the places we evolved to inhabit. And instead of being in nature, we sit in these little boxes and we go home in a box and we sit in a box and we sleep on a box. We're just in boxes all the time. If we could go outside and just solve a problem in nature, a huge amount of the right hemisphere comes back online. And by the way, like your cancer killer cells will triple if you just go to a forest for a couple of hours. It's incredible how good this is. Okay, so if you don't like nature, what do? Make something. Make something. This is why I'm all excited about your husband.
I could not agree with you more. You have to like transmute that energy. Otherwise, it's caustic. It just like, yeah.
Well, it turns into anxiety.
Right.
And I had no idea, being a life coach and everything. Actually, I became a life coach because I was so busy trying to be happy that people asked me about my methods. I never tried to be. I never had that in my sights, never thought of it as a career option at all. And when I started writing books, it was so people would go away and leave me alone. I'm not even kidding. So the things I wanted to do from the time I was little are all creative and nature-based. And I think most of us are like that. Give me a pile of clay and tell me to make a pot. I'll be very happy. I used to be a late riser. Now I get up at 5 or 6 o'clock and paint for about 5 hours.
Wow.
And I thought that everyone in my family would object because I'm supposed to be a breadwinner and live in the real world. And instead, I heard from my older kids, we always knew if we could just get you painting, the house would be a happy place. And I was like, what? You weren't upset that I wasn't earning money? We kind of liked it when you were happy.
Right.
I had no idea how intense that was and how toxic pushing it away had become.
Right. And that's like back to what you talked about in the beginning, which is finding our true nature and then actually listening to it. But we're so conditioned to think that we have to go out in the world and like the only way to make a living is to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But, there are so many paths, and maybe actually listening and resonating with your true nature is what will bring you to the path.
Oh, I think it does. And I know you kind of live that way. I mean, just the thing with the house that you just gave me, with your apartment, it immediately showed me that you're a person who's living much closer to your true nature than most people in our culture, which is why you're making this podcast, right? But
what about that? Just out of curiosity, like what do you mean by that?
Well, most people are like, oh, there's the basement and there's stuff in there I never want to look in, and I can't get my closet clean, and I got to throw out all this stuff, and I can't. And I have a whole room that's just full of documents about my parents, and I hate it, but I can't get rid of it.
Got it.
Yeah. They've all got a metaphor for something that's not going right in their lives. So let me ask you something, because I wrote about this as well. One of the big anxiety truths that is always a lie is you have to get you have to work for the man. You have to get an office job and punch the clock, which is so ridiculous. Nobody even did it until like 200 years ago, which is nothing in evolutionary terms. The stuff we used to do to survive is what we now do on vacation. Hunting, fishing, gardening, weaving. That, we do it on vacation because it's fun. Okay, so just saying that because I left it out before. So what little I know about you is that you're in wellness and you do all kinds of things related to wellness and well-being. So like you have this podcast. What else do you do?
So the company started by offering plant-based, organic, ready-to-eat, highly nutritious meals. So now we deliver all over the country.
Wow.
So the podcast is part of the educational, like community component, and then we have supplements and powders and snacks.
So do you also do stuff like online marketing, or do you ever travel and speak and try to get people interested and all that?
Yeah. I'm highly kind of like client facing.
Cool. So you're interacting with a lot of people and offering products that you really believe in. And then you do this because it's kind of a mental supplement that you can give people. In other words, your way of making a living looks more like an ecosystem than like a factory. A factory just pumps out the same thing day in, day out as fast as it can. Just more. An ecosystem has a lot of different contributors, a lot of different ways that energy enters the system, and a lot of different players that live in mutual support of each other, in symbiosis. And I really believe, my career experience has always been that if you bring the energy of an authentic love of what you're doing, if you give that time and you start to create anything out of it, people begin to gravitate toward that. And you end up, I call it constellating an economic ecosystem. And I think this is a better way to make a living in the 21st century, definitely than the jobs that were created in the 19th and 20th centuries, which are kind of, it's like making a dying instead of making a living.
Totally.
Yeah.
And also in this day and age, like there's more opportunity. We have so many options and ways to make income. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I started writing, I would go to these meetings in these big skyscrapers on Fifth Avenue in New York, and there would be a whole huge building, and you'd go up the elevator, and there would be different imprints, and all the great books of the world had been. It was very intimidating. Now it's like it took that to get the words from a writer's brain to a reader's brain. Now all I have to do is press one button, and they can have it for free. That entire industry sort of collapsed because the need for it disappeared. And so it still exists, but kind of the way candle factories exists. Used to be everyone needed them all the time, and now they're just kind of nice on the holidays. And books are the same way.
Right. Yeah. Eating this way changed my life, changed my body. And when my co-founder and I started it, we thought there might be one other person out there who also wants to change their life, change the way they eat, their relationship to food, and wants to change their body. And so let's go find that person. And then one person turned into 10, turned into thousands, turned into millions. And but it was all from that like very important source, which was I found something that changed my life, and I feel as though I'm offering a gift. Like I'm not a salesperson. I'm in fact the worst sales. Whitney's way better than I am. I'm the worst salesperson because I never want to sell you anything.
Right.
What I honestly feel like I'm doing is giving you a gift, and maybe it's not the right gift for everyone, but it's certainly the right gift for many, many people.
Right.
And so if that resonates with you and you're looking for this and you want to change and you want to take control of your health, this is the gift that I'm offering you. This is the exchange that we have.
And that is a perfect summation of the psychology of actually living your purpose. People find, I mean, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, you said it's about living in service. And I used to think that. Then I found out it made me really anxious to always be living in service. And instead, I just started doing stuff I liked. So this is the way you serve your purpose. You go to the grocery store and you see the organic goods and you see the ones with chemicals, and you go, something in me just wants the organic. I'm going to buy this avocado instead of that one. You have begun the series of choices that is taking you to the full expression of your mission. It's little tiny things. I'm going to spend the morning making something instead of watching TV. I'm going to go to the white couch and sit with my children and push my husband's tools off the terrace. And say to him, make something.
Make something, yeah.
What do you want to make?
It's almost like you have to really shed the belief that like what you're offering has to be different than what you do every day, and also shed this belief that like what is good for me is only good for me. Because like what I hear you saying is I decided to do things that felt good, that felt right. And then by doing that, you were actually in service to others. You were actually offering a gift that's actually the only way we can be in service. We can't be in service by like slogging and
self-sacrifice. People think that self-sacrifice.
It's different.
Like there are all these songs about, I would drag myself down the road for you until I died, but you wouldn't do that. What good is that? I don't want some mangled dude crawling up to me. Like, take care of yourself and let's do something.
Right. It's so counterintuitive kind of to, I think, what especially women have been taught. Certainly, my mom had me when she was 40 and definitely grew up thinking that her role was to be in service to a man.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I think she is convinced that that is what gives her purpose and meaning. And it's when you ask her even like, what do you want to do? What do you want for dinner? It's really hard for her to come up with those answers. And so,
I'm perfectly comfortable. No, I'm totally comfortable.
I'm great. I'm fine. Yeah.
You're not comfortable.
Right. No, not at all. And also like you probably, I don't know, maybe you wanted eggs and bacon for breakfast, but here you are eating what we're eating because it's what,
Right.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying. It's really just coming home to, we call it body intelligence because a lot of what we do focuses on, gut health and the gut-brain axis and anxiety and transforming your gut health. But also body intelligence, which is to learn how to listen. First, you cultivate a body you get to listen to, because I think a lot of us want to listen to ourselves, but we're so caught up in not eating the right things that message can get really kind of messed up. So first you build a body you get to listen to, and then you listen. Like you actually take the time to listen. And I hear you're kind of extrapolating it even more, where we tend to focus like, listen, what are you craving? Like you get to listen to your cravings. We were taught you should curb your cravings. And I hear what you're saying is like, listen to what you actually want. Like, do you want to go right or do you want to go left? And like, follow that.
And if you want to know the big picture, I always say, make a list of things you want, and people make a list that's basically social, things that the society thinks are good. I want to make $1 billion and retire, whatever. And then I say, okay, now when you're awake in the night, what do you yearn for? And they make a completely different list. And it's always simple. It's always a feeling state, and it never costs money. It's always peace, belonging, freedom, joy. There's just a handful of things. And there are so many ways to get them if we just, as you said, listen to what our bodies want for health, but also what they want for activity, for a life's adventure, for love, for everything. Listen to your body, listen to your soul, listen to your emotions, listen to everything. It's all wise. It's all nature.
Yes. We had Dr. Zach Bush on the podcast a while ago. He's amazing, but he talks about how we humans have defined ourselves out of nature. Yeah. Like quite literally, when you go to the dictionary, it says like nature, anything but like what humans have created. And like as if we're not part of nature and what we make isn't actually part of nature.
Isn't that bizarre?
It's so bizarre. We're othering ourselves in this very strange way.
It's very much a process that goes on in the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere loves to divide and other, and the right hemisphere likes to combine and unite.
Well, I have loved this conversation, and I'm so curious, like, what is your light work? What is something that these listeners can do to kind of practice what you've talked about today?
I love the phrase light work, and it has multiple meanings. So it could mean, the sort of divine, the light of the divine. It could mean also something easy to carry. And I'd really like everyone to just take a few minutes every day to do things that make them feel lit up. And my own stuff that I make is usually art and I'm writing a novel now. I'm painting every day for hours. I go for long walks every day. But what we're all doing together is encouraging one another to live in a new way, because the way we have been living is devastating our ecosystems and our lives. So what lights me up is getting people to see that and say, I'm going to do my own light work.
I love that, because I think so many of us need permission to do those things because we're taught about productivity and do. And we're so forgetting the most meaningful part of what it is to even be on this planet and exist and have life and to create. And so, I hear you offering permission in your light work. So thank you.
Thank you.
I've loved having you on today. Thank you for being on the Sakara Life podcast, Marty.
Such a pleasure. I'm so excited about everything you're doing in the world. And I'm going to go look at your supplements and things.
Yeah.
I'm into this. Yeah.
Cool. All right, beautiful.